Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So we are still waiting for my co-chair Daniela. I think he should be joining us very soon. So, but I think it's time now. Oh, Daniela is coming. Hi, Daniela. Hello, Daniela. Okay, I think Daniela might have some issue regarding the.
Yes, I did, but I solved them.
Okay, that's good. So I think it's time now. So let's get started. Okay. So hello everyone. Welcome to the IETF-IVY interim meeting. I think it's a virtual meeting, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everybody. I think it might be a challenging time for some of you guys to participate in our today's meeting, but we are glad that you all make it on time. So thank you, everyone. And again, I would like to remind everyone that please be aware that this session is being recorded. And for Note 12, I think still I would like to remind everyone that please be aware that when you contribute, you are expected to follow the IETF processes and the IPR policies. And if not familiar with the slide, you can take a look at this slide and a couple of documents in this slide. And for our today's meeting, I believe we will have 1 hour and a half, and it's an online meeting. And for the minute taker, we hope we would have some volunteer to help taking the minutes. And then you will win a lot of thanks from the working group. And also here is gives a link of our this meeting material for today, and you can check with that. And the working group status here, I would like to convey to the working group that we have created a new IVY GitHub organization for the working group collaboration. I think once we have decided the way to go, the working group item is encouraged to be maintained on the IVY GitHub organization, and for your collaboration, and also for the issue tracker. And also, I think once we have decided to do some work in IVY, which might be network inventory related, then we should have the weekly call for the design team discussion in IVY working group. The discussion should happen in IVY. So this is to be done for the chairs to create the IVY weekly call for your design team discussion. So if you have some favorite slot to discuss, then just let us know so that we can send the meeting invitation. Or you, it's okay that if you would like the same slot as the EC Camp design team discussion. So just let the chairs know. And also in the near future, there might be one or more interim meetings for us to accelerate the working group process. And the intention is to not to get the, so there is no need to worry about the work being slowed. Okay, so for the here is the slide of our today's agenda. I think we will present the result of the polling which happened in the past 3 weeks about the way forward with the network inventory model, and we will have 20 minutes for the discussion, and then I think Bo Wu will have a presentation about the proposal on inventory core model and terms of network inventory, and then followed by Italo about the young data model for the network hardware inventory, and then I think Mariso will have a presentation about the asset lifecycle management and operations problem statement. The chairs think that this work might not be very tightly related to the current focus of IVY now, but still is a very interesting work to explore. So we will have 10 minutes to discuss it. And finally, hopefully we will have 30 minutes for the open discussion and the wrap up. Is there any agenda question for our today's meeting? I think if there is no, then here we will present about the result of the poll for the network inventory based model. So for I think as the working group might, I think you should all know that, and so in the past 3 weeks, we were having a polling on the mailing list, which is about how to move forward with the network inventory core model. And the options include any of the network inventory related drafts that has been presented in the IETF-117 meeting at San Francisco. And here we raised a poll and with 3 options for the working group to choose their favorite one. And option 1 is to adopt the CCAM hardware network hardware inventory draft in IVY and evolve it to become the network inventory based model. And option 2 is to adopt the ops area the network inventory management draft in ops area.
Xiufang, you're. I don't know if I'm having problems hearing you or the problem is on your side. Can anyone speak up to check if the problem is on Xiufang's side or mine?
I think it's on Xiufang's side.
Okay, because I can hear you well. Let's try to chat with her. Otherwise, I can move forward. I just needed to share the slides. Okay. Luckily, I have a backup. Administrator. And I will share the screen. It says all the slots for the requested media are already taken. I need to stop her presentation. Revoke slides. Share screen. And
Hello, Daniel.
oh, you're back.
Yeah, I tried to reconnect. It seems that I was dropped.
Okay. So in order to save time, maybe I can continue sharing the slides.
Sure.
I'm sharing the agenda poll for network inventory.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm trying to say that in the last 3 weeks, we were having a poll on the mailing list, and there are 3 options, and option 1 and option 2 are regarding to adopt the existing drafts in currently in other working groups. I think it's in CCamp and in Ops area working group. We would like to ask for the working group preference about adopt them in IVY and involve it to become the network inventory based model. And for option 3, in case none of them, the working group think none of them is good enough, the chairs might write a 0.0 version, including just the table of content, and we would like to be covered in each session, and which will then be handed over to a pool of others to bring it to the working group adoption. And next slide, please. Yes, and I think that we do have a lot of folks have made very excellent comments and trigger very good discussion on the mailing list. We have around 25 people indicated their preference, and here we would like to thank you everyone for participating in the poll. However, I would say that the result turns out to be very divided, and it seems that the working group has a split preference of different options, and we have a fair amount of people support option 1, and a majority of them, I think, actually support to use the module structure of the first draft as the starting point, and then incorporate other additional parts to become the network inventory based module. And some folks directly indicate to reuse the valid aspects in the second drafts, which the chair think might be a little confusing and close to option 3 or option 4, which I will explain later. And also we have some other viewpoints. I think they are from the authors and contributors of the first draft. They indicate to use a modular approach, which allows us to publish a hardware inventory module first, and then with one or more augmentation modules that cover others, which is in the IVY charter scope.
Shufang, your voice is now pretty low. I don't know if you are far from the mic.
Is this okay now? This okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty low.
So, okay, I will try to be louder. I think I'm close to the mic already. Yeah. Next slide, please. And we also have the other half prefers the option 3 or option 4, and we have some folks also invoice their support of both option 2 and option 3, and some viewpoints differ slightly from what the chairs has proposed. I think Alex had made a comment which to say that I guess this makes me a proponent of option 3, but with the caveat that this would not need to restart from scratch. Really an option 4 that says merge for overall structure and common paths, which in this case is possible, and split the remaining difference. So I think let's say it's an option 4 temporarily, so we have a fair amount of people prefer option 1, while the other half prefer option 3 and option 4. And it seems that in the end, it seems that the boundaries among the different options has blurred, right? There doesn't seem to have so much difference now between option 1 and option 3 or 4 as we thought previously. For example, even we go with option 1 or 2 as the starting point, we can update it and might still take valid aspects from the other draft, which is actually a combination of both. But I think we might decide whether we want a merged effort or a modular approach. So here I would like to emphasize that this is not about any decision making of this chair's presentation. I know that we are still having the follow-up presentation from the authors of the drafts. So for this part, the chairs try to help the working group identify the divergences among different opinions and hopefully to help steer the working group into agreement. And next slide, please. And also we have some questions derived from the polling. And the very top one is the separate evolution of hardware and additional inventory in different drafts. Is this something the working group wants to pursue? I think the authors will still have to present this part, and this is something the chairs would like the working group to consider. And if we decide to go with the option 3 or option 4 to set merge to existing drafts, if this is the right way to go, then how should we manage the author list? I already see there was a proposal on the mailing list to say we pick up one leading vendor and operator from each documents to from each drafts to document the merged version together. Does this make sense to you, or you have any other suggestions you can voice? And also there is another question I think has already been also be touched by the working group. Should the equipment room be included in the network inventory based model? I think Alex has made some comments and suggestions, and the working group should consider this because I think the equipment room is about the location information is in the IV charter scope, but should this location information be included in the network inventory based module, or it should be included in another separate module? Next slide, please. Oh, yes, I think there is still another technical proposal made by Alex to say that, for example, one could start with the CCAM hardware inventory draft, modify it to remove the network hardware inventory container, and splitting the remaining module in two for equipment room and network elements, both of which will now be top-level containers. Remaining modifications can be made from there. And really, we would I think the working group don't have to be struggling with the exact option of this choice, but just consider this proposal whether it makes sense to you. Okay.
Jinra.
Okay. I think Daniela, do you have some other thing to add here?
No, no. So
last slide. Mm-hmm.
One thing that I wanted to add, which is, which I added as a bullet point in one of the previous slides, is the fact that the fact that we were polling one draft or the other, it didn't mean that the draft was ready to be adopted and then sent to the ISG for publication. I mean, in both cases, we were trying to understand which was the draft, if any, that was meeting most of our requirements and that was easier to use as the foundation for our work. So that's why in the end the difference between option 1, 3, or 4 is extremely negligible. Whether we decided to go for option 1, option 3, or option 4, the result is basically the same. Another thing is that we will now listen to the 3 different presentations from different authors. And we will try to answer the questions that we raised here at the end of the session. We have half an hour for open discussion. So ideally, a successful meeting is a meeting that allows us answering these the 3 questions that you see here. If we conclude the meeting with an answer to this question, I think we can be happy, and we have a pretty simple decision to make to progress the work.
Yes.
If no one has any other questions, we can start with the presentations.
Yes, I think the first presentation is. Would you like to share the slides, Daniela, or would you like me to share for the author?
Probably. Let me see if it works on my side. So.
Apologize for my bad audio before. I just can't figure out the reason exact.
Share screen. Network inventory. Should be this one. Yes.
Yeah, you can see it now. Thank you.
Bo is presenting, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Bo, and I'm here to present this network inventory management model on behalf of all the authors. So next slide, please. So the authors, actually, we also commented on the IVY polling that we still believe that our proposal from this draft has something as foundation for hardware and software together inventory. So this slide is about what we have discussed with the CCAM authors on some merging efforts. So at IETF-IVY-20230920-1400, we received some good, useful comments, such as that most people don't like RFC 8345 topology augmentation and removing some non-inventory attributes. So after revising our model on the September CCAM inventory weekly call, we try to discuss with CCAM authors to see whether our use cases can be incorporated into CCAM inventory model. So we had 2 in-depth discussion, and actually you can access the discussion where the GitHub link above. And here thanks everyone for good discussion from the contributors and authors of the CCAM inventory author draft. And from the discussion, we discussed the use cases and the term definition, and also the candidate merging models. But from discussion, we found that although our revised model and the CCAMP inventory model looks quite similar, but our goals were quite different. The CCAMP authors, it seems, actually they prefer a hard-only model at present. But we, the authors, we expect a more generic inventory model with hardware and software together. So next slide, please. So here is like the model we proposed. On the left is the previous model. And from this model, we try to remove RFC 8345 dependencies and some unnecessary inventory attributes. And on the right is a new model. Here, in this model, we try to use network elements, same as CCAMP inventory authors. We try to use network elements to represent both physical and virtual devices. And also the components represents both hardware and software components. We use a similar, same IETF hardware definition, and also some attributes from IETF system. But we extend the IETF hardware class with some software class components. So that's the model we proposed. And this model we proposed, we can, based on the discussion on the last IETF meeting, most folks feel that license should be optional, not be the core part of the network inventory. So we also agree with that. Next slide, please. So it seems that quite obvious that it seems that our model and CCAMP inventory model can be merged. But actually from discussion, we feel like it seems not works. So so we try to see whether we can merge through the augmentation approaches, as the most of us feel that the CCAMP hardware inventory can be the base network inventory model. So here we're trying to see whether from this base model can achieve what the generic inventory model. And let's begin with the option 2. I think these two options actually, they came from the Italo's 117 presentation. So here I divided into 2 types. And the option 2 in Italo's previous suggestion that separate physical network element and virtual network element, they have different components list. But we can see that this approach has too many duplication nodes. And actually in implementation, virtual devices actually use same inventory attributes as physical devices for same user experience. And as option 1, this is a difference between the authors of the 2 drafts. From the CCAMP authors, it suggested that the common inventory model can be obtained through simple augmentation, just based on the hardware-only inventory. But I don't think this works, because if we want to augment a model, we cannot change the definition of network element. In current CCAM inventory model, the network element, actually they defined as a physical device. So that's a issue I think we need to discuss how to resolve this. And next slide, please. This slide is still like to give a better comparison so that we can see why I think that hardware network inventory cannot be augmented into a general network inventory. Actually, this will be resulting to inventory model, not a common inventory model. Here I made some small modification to the CCAM inventory model to make a more straightforward comparison. The purpose of change actually is to reflect definition consistency. Although CCAM inventory model doesn't explicit said that network elements is physical, but actually in the draft it says so. So I made this change. In the CCAM inventory, the network element is defined as devices installed on one or several chassis. So that's a reason I think this is a physical network inventory. So from my perspective, I think like IETF hardware, the component cost has been be restricted to hardware class. So this hardware model cannot be augmented to a generic platform model like OpenConfig did, right? The OpenConfig platform model cannot be just extended the hardware model to be a hardware and software together model. You can see that it changed the type of the component to the union, so then to support software and hardware together. And similarly, I think because of the network element defining CCAM is a physical one, when we cannot through augmentation that just adding a is virtual leaf to make the network element can support both physical and virtual. So that's the issue I see. So next slide, please. So from my perspective, I think if still the IVY want a core network inventory model that it's about the devices and also hardware, software licenses for devices can be physical or virtual, then we still need a merged draft. In that way, we can have a consistent terms for the network inventory and also the network element, whether the network element represent a physical device or virtual device. And also in that merge draft can provide extension guidance on other inventory items, like whether the sites or racks as a location is also network inventory. So next slide, please. This is a separate one that I think also related with inventory, because I see that in CCAM inventory model, there is a inventory topology model. It's a hardware inventory topology model. So I suggest we can define a separate IETF inventory topology module, that this module can just be designed to to fulfill the mapping and correlation purpose. For example, for SAP, the attributes such as port inventory reference and interface name, and to associate like the port location, capacity of the port. And a node can also be used to define cluster device. And this model can also support some logical inventory, such as some routing protocols or some policies. So this is another thing. Next slide, please. So here is something we proposed to the working group. I think this our proposal is quite relevant with chair's questions. So we don't have like strong preference that whether like have a hardware only model or like software and hardware together. But we still think hardware and software within a generic model is our presentation, but we don't like, we agree, I agree with hardware only because I discussed with the authors and I agree that requirements is there. So I can see there's some requirements for the hardware only, but still I see that network inventory model is also a way to go, but it's not based on hardware inventory, but a separate module that need to be defined. And option 2 is that we define a common core network inventory model. That's something we can discuss after the 3 presentations. And here I give a link to the like proposed the core network inventory model, and this has been discussed in CCAM author, so you can have a reference, use this reference here. And another proposal is that we can define a separate draft of network inventory model for mapping and correlation requirements. So thanks, everyone. This is the end of my presentation. There's some questions.
So I really like the idea of having a separate draft for the mapping and the correlation of inventory and topology. This is absolutely one of the items in our charter, but I think is a good candidate for a separate draft for us to work at the second stage. Regarding the core network model, the 2 options, probably it would be good to discuss about that after we listen to Italo's proposal, I guess. Okay. Which I pull up immediately.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Bo.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I'm Italo, I'm presenting on behalf of co-authors how we think we can use the draft, the CCAM draft as a starting point for the base inventory model, and to have, as discussed on the main list, some modular approach toward modularizing the solution. Next slide, please. Okay, some paraphrasing of the questions that has been raised by the chairs is about whether the split between hardware and hardware only and hardware plus software use cases is something you want to pursue, and whether it makes sense to start focusing on hardware and then software as an addition on top of it, And the second question was about the point touched by the Kimmer room, whether they are connected and whether they should be part of the core model or addressed on top. Next slide. Our answers. Okay, next slide. Okay. Oh yeah, on the first two questions, the answer is yes. And for the splitting between hardware and software is not trivial, and that's why we have some slides that we try to go into more details about how this could be done. For the connection between a Kimmer room and inventory, we think they are connected. But for the second question, core model versus additional model, it's a bit complex, the answer, so we will go with some more detailed answers in the next slides. Okay. Then when we look at try to combine hardware and software, I think Hubo also showed there are many ways. For example, we can have physical and virtual network elements in the same list or in a different list. We can have hardware and software components in the same list or in different lists. And if you want to be extreme, you can also have the inventory of the licensee can be in a separate list or in the same list as the hardware and software components. In these slides, we made assumption that we follow the approach in the WZWB draft. So we try to see whether we can modularize, even if we want to have a physical and virtual network elements in the same list, hardware and software components in the same list. And it seems everybody agrees on having the licenses as a separated list. These are the assumptions in these slides, and we need maybe to get confirmation that is the direction the working group wants to go versus other options. Next slide. By the way, these are the most complex assumptions. So if some of these assumptions is not valid, the modularization will be easier. So if you want to split between hardware, software, and licensing, what we can do, we can start with a base inventory model that covers only the hardware use cases based on what we have in the CCAM draft. There was a clear indication that if the top-level container needs to be renamed as network inventory to have broader scope than just hardware. And what we need to do is to make the list of components more generic. So the definition of the component list should be more generalized, that it will be able to cope with the software components and not only with hardware components, even if software components are not defined in this document. And then we can have a separated document, which is a separate module, sorry, which is based on the software, which is adding software inventory on top of it, that can be used together with the base inventory when we have use cases to support hardware plus software use cases. And this model can be follow the approach on the WZWB, and then we can define the attributes and identities that are needed for software inventory. And then another augmentation for the licenses, and also licenses proposed in WZWB, so we can have we can cherry picking from that list how to do licenses. And then with separate modules, people can address different type of use cases: hardware only, hardware plus software, hardware plus licensing, or hardware plus software plus licenses. Next slide, please. It's just a matter of, okay. Okay, in order to make the definition of the component list more generic, we can, for example, adopt the approach to define the class no more as a hardware type, hardware identity, IANA hardware identity, but a union, so as proposed in the draft WZWB. The attributes, as was said, are more or less the same, so we can take as the basis what we have in the draft, in the second draft. The list of network elements will be part of the core of the base inventory model. For the overarching network inventory container, I have another slide, so we can discuss later on. Next slide. The software inventory can be just an augmentation in a different module. What you need to augment, for example, is an attribute that indicates that the network element is virtual rather than physical, and you may have new identities to represent software components, because and then we can have also augmentation on the choice of component class, where you can describe all the attributes which are specific for different software component types. Next slide. So, that will mean that if you implement hardware and software, you have to implement two modules. Next slide. And the same for the licenses. The licenses will be augmented under the top container, network inventory. This means that if you don't support licenses, you don't implement this model. And you can combine this model only with hardware or with both hardware and software. And the attributes can be taken from, we have already, the WZWB draft is proposing some attributes. As a starting point, we can use that one. Next one. Okay, for the Kimmer room, okay, we have also in the CCAM discussion that we discovered that the Kimmer rooms is a little bit too restrictive. So the proposal here is to generalize the concept of the Kimmer rooms and define a more generic concept like site. The Kimmer room is just a type of site, and but we can in future define a new type of site by extending the type. We are also thinking that sites can be recursive. For example, a campus is a site which contains buildings, and a building can be another type of site which contains Kimmer rooms and so on. And this list of sites, based on the discussion and the proposal from Alex, it seems common agreement that it will be good to have in a separated module, because also in this case we discovered there are some cases where there is a requirement to report the site, and some cases where reporting the sites is not required. Having a separate modules will allow the modularity to support or not the reporting of the sites on a use case by use cases basis. And you can combine this with only hardware, with hardware and software, and with the licenses. It's a very flexible combination. And we propose to keep the common root container rather than putting licensing, network elements, and the Kimmer rooms and sites as top-level container. There was no strong opinion when we discussed it last week in the informal call, but actually there is a slight advantage if you have a common root container. If you want to retrieve all the information in your network, you can just do a single RESTconf get operation on the top-level container and get everything in one operation rather than in 3 different operations. Next slide. Okay, this will be how the augmentation for the network for the network element location can look like. You have a list of sites, and okay, the common attributes for the sites will be under site, and then you have a site class for which we can, at this moment in time, we have defined only the Kimmer room, and what is specific to the Kimmer room will now go under the Kimmer room specific information, that like the list of racks and the list of shelves, which is a Kimmer room technology site specific. Next slide. And so basically, this is graphical representation from the 2 models that we have, IETF network inventory, hardware inventory that we have today on the table. We can split into 4 models. One network inventory base model, which 3 augmentation, 1 for network element location, 1 for network licenses, and 1 for software inventory. And we can piggyback, you can cherry pick from the 2 models, in particular on the core model. We can look at as a next step, attribute by attribute, and see if there is some attributes that we can copy from the WZWB draft in the network inventory. Next slide. Okay, now having proposed 4 modules and forgetting the 5th module that was about the association with inventory, the question is how many documents. We can have 2 documents, one for the base model and any location, or another draft for the soft and a second document for software and license inventory, or can go with 4 documents. We can be very modular, having 1 draft for each module, which becomes maybe 5 documents if we consider also the topology, navigation toward topology. And the idea is not 1 draft, because 1 draft we are mixing items which are more mature with items which are less mature. It doesn't look an effective, time-effective way to organize the documentation. Next one. And the next step is basically once we agreed how many drafts and which content and how to modify, we can do the update. And I don't see any reason why we cannot adopt all the drafts, how many to be decided together as working group documents. And then after we have this as a starting point, one important characteristic to making sure that the modularization works is to have a detailed review of every single attribute in the network element list, identify if there are attributes which apply only to physical network elements, attributes which apply only to virtual network elements, and attributes which apply to both physical and virtual network elements. And I think this is something to do on attribute by attribute case. And the last one is to do exactly the same for the hardware and software components. Since we have said we want to have a common list, we have to make sure that we know what attributes apply only to hardware components, what applies only to software, what applies to both hardware and software components. Okay, that's all.
Okay, so before we jump into the questions, I wanted, so you were proposing, these are the four, which are the four modules that you are
the green one,
proposing to add?
The green one, the green, the one on the right.
One.
Yes, the blue one are the current one.
Okay, so basically it would be a sort of split. So I don't. These are 6 modules. This is what I don't get. From
oh, okay, no. The one on the left are the 2 existing one. Yes, the one on the left, the blue one are the existing one. The green one are the new proposed modules. Yes,
which is network inventory, licenses, network element allocation, and software inventory. Okay. We had people in the queue. Marisol is the first one, please.
Daniel, sorry, which name did you say?
Yours.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Italo, for the presentation. I have one comment, and I will reiterate in my presentation as well. But I understood on the purpose of the IVY working group, it was to take basic modules for covering inventory. And that's why as well we have been a bit with DMLMO, we have been out of the discussions. But if my feedback on this proposal, if we consider licensing as part of another, and I believe it should be another module, right? Not basic,
yes.
But another
That's
module.
what we propose. It's another module, because we have use cases where we don't have licenses. There's use cases where we have licenses. So right. That's why having a modular approach makes you can
but
easily.
For this, as we propose since day one on the MLMO, it should be good to have the learning from our model, right? And we propose a module specifically for licenses. That way, the way we are not, with the feedback of the OPSA working group, we are not calling licenses anymore. We are calling entitlement, just to cover as well the open source discussions that were put in place there. But I would like, if we consider at all licenses for the first approach of the IVY working group, to include the reference from the DMLMO draft that we have active.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm very sorry. Okay. If there is something in the LMO that I think we need to consider that. I fully agree.
I mean, in that case, that draft would be for sure the best starting point for the licenses module, the licenses work.
Yeah.
Next one, Alex.
I have 2 quick comments or questions. First question concerns the location information. I'm wondering actually. So I'm completely, as you know, I'm completely for separating it. So I think this is good. But I'm wondering actually, why would we still be augmenting network inventory? I think actually the location is something that can be kept separate. I mean, of course, you want to cross-reference. You want them to be able to cross-reference, but I don't see any reason why a location should be included in an inventory. Maybe that's a design detail, but I think I just wanted to bring this up here and ask for that on the record. So that's my first my first common question. The second one concerns actually the top level container. And I think it's good to rename it to network inventory. It's a lot more general and so forth. However, my question is actually, why not go a step further and get rid of the container entirely? I'm not sure if it is actually needed. I think we can do without it. Again, maybe design detail, but I just wanted to bring this up here and hear your reaction.
Well, yes. If you get rid of the top-level container, I think the first question is become the answer, because the network element location will be a top-level container by himself. So yeah. I think the reason why we have a slight preference for the top-level container is really the fact that with a top-level container you can retrieve everything in a single operation, rather, because if you look at if you implement everything, you will have 3 top-level containers. You will have the network elements, the network element location, and the licenses. And if you want to retrieve everything, you need to do three get operation. With a top-level container, you can do that with only 1 get operation. But other than that, I don't see any major difference between having or not having the top-level container myself.
Right, yeah, but
I don't know if other people have different opinion.
Okay, all right. Maybe further discussion. Yeah, I have some. Yeah, there's some. Yeah, so that's a pro. So thank you. I think there are also some cons, but all right. Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, Alex. I just wanted to make a comment. If we go for the top-level container, the name is super generic. It's a network inventory. We need to be super careful to clearly state what's in scope and what is not, because if you read the IETF network inventory, you might think that it includes software, licenses, locations, etc. So we need to be super careful and super precise in defining what's in it and what is not.
Right.
Sorry, Alex.
But one question actually on this one also is, so clearly understood. So if the only use case is network inventory, then okay, fine. Then maybe, but I'm always concerned with basically expanding on the instance name, because every instance now needs to have this prefix, at least in XML rendering. The other thing is there are maybe other use cases which want to use this inventory model, but which are not inventory per se. So for instance, when we talk about network digital twin, right, that would be able to operate on that as well. But that would be, I'm not sure if we would say the digital twin works on an inventory, because it would need things like asset tags, for instance. But I do think actually it would be in scope in terms of the use cases being addressed here. Anyway, maybe further discussion on this, but I just wanted to mention this here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Italo, do you want to reply, or we move to the next question?
I think we can. I think it's a detail. I think we can also change later on if you think we don't need a top-level container. Yeah.
Okay. Bo, you're next.
Yes. Italo, are you still thinking the base IETF network inventory still is a hardware only one?
In the content, yes, but the definition will be generalized such that other type of component, other type of network elements can be supported by extensions.
So you mean the network element definition will be changed?
Yes, definitely, yes.
But how can you say that is how can you still call that hardware only in that way? Because you augment into a software network inventory. In that way, like if the base network element already can support physical device and virtual device, it's already there. You don't need to augment, right?
Yes, but you don't know whether you need additional information for the virtual network elements. That's why I'm saying. And so you know, for example, if you have a network inventory without the software network inventory, that all the devices are physical. If you have both network and software, then you know that you have a mix of virtual and physical devices, and then you know you will do we need to have an attribute that distinguishes among the two?
I still don't agree with you on this definition, because I don't think like using a simple augmentation will like change the network element definition. That's not, I mean, you divide it into 4 parts, but I still don't think the software network inventory is the right way to go.
Why?
Because you see, you just said that network inventory is already a generic one. The network element can be a physical one and a virtual one. In that way, it's already there. So how can you augment it?
But let's look at a case. Why? Okay, network elements were defined 20 years ago, where physical network elements were only physical, and people invented a virtual network element to do the same.
I don't see from the use case part. I just see from the module design.
From the modeling, you can see the slide. It's an attribute that says the network element is virtual. And think if we can also have a type, and then we can say, okay, this is there are different type of network element, and we can export, we can define the physical, and then you can have a different type of network element in the software network inventory. I mean, there is always a way to extend. Otherwise, it means that we cannot do anything until we define all the types. I mean, putting everything together is a way not to publish anything, because there is always something new to be added.
As
there is always something new to be added. And Yang is very flexible. You can always add. So why do we need to understand the requirements and complete the work before doing the first step? I don't understand.
I don't understand also. Let's discuss.
Yeah, probably one thing that would help would be to define what is a software. It is just a virtual node, or it includes also something else? Because if it's just a virtual node, it's probably one type of hardware, or better, one type of node. If it's something more, maybe you need something different. But let's move on with the queue. We still have Olga and Rob.
Hi, thanks everybody. I have 2 comments, and one are related. Both are related to some parts of the discussions that we already had. The first one is about the top level component, that if we are talking about virtual network functions versus physical network functions, I do believe having some kind of common core model there that incorporates the two, that could be added through augmentation, is better than starting from physical only, because these are the kind of 2 different things, especially if you think in terms of how you are presenting them and, you know, how they're related. They could exist one beside the other, and in some cases you may want even to abstract them so you don't care whether they're virtual or physical. If we are talking about software again, and I agree with Danielle in terms of software versus virtual network function, there may be need for augmentation there, but that doesn't mean that the top level one is just physical. It could be physical or virtual. Next comment is similar to Alex's about the location, you know, having location augmenting physical inventory. I would say I'm not saying that it's not the best way. I think we need more discussions how to model the locations in terms of how it relates to topology, how we will kind of connect to the digital map, and how it will be used in digital twin. So by augmenting...
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
No, the intention is not to augment the physical location, it's to augment the network inventory.
Yeah.
And that is not augmented the physical. I mean, it's...
But you were saying that your proposal is to have a
The network inventory will
Physical
mainly
here.
focus on the hardware, physical network element and hardware, but the definition will be general. I mean, it's like a type. You know, you have a type, and then you say, okay, you have an identity ref. For example, you can say the network element is physical. Then I know all the details. Other identities can be added in the future, and then when you have a new type of network element, it's just a matter of defining a new identity.
Yeah,
And
but
then
you are going from
new.
specific and augmenting. You are not going generic like other standards would go. You are going from MTOSI perspective, which is older than the kind of SID perspective or ETSI perspective or ONF perspective that is talking about generic things like resources, and then they could either be physical or logical or virtual, you know. So you are going from, if you say that the top level is physical, then it is specific.
The top level is network inventory and can
Yeah.
contain physical and logical elements. But
and where is this physical? You are not augmenting it with physical, are you? You are just augmenting it with.
So you suggest to have a fifth model with the hardware-specific augmentations rather than putting there in the base.
So maybe I didn't understand, and it's also based on Bo's comment. Like, you know, are you proposing that the top level one includes both physical and virtual, or are you proposing to augment physical with virtual and software?
I understood it was the latter, Italo.
Yes. But yeah, okay. Well, the idea was not to have an hardware augmentation since hardware is always required. But if you think it's more moderate to have an hardware augmentation, we can also go with an hardware augmentation, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, the point was that, do we have requirements where we want to manage inventory without hardware components? A network with only virtual network elements.
The question is also if from IETF network inventory you remove element location, licenses, software devices, hardware devices, what is left there?
No, then there will be there will be the list of network elements and the list of components, but no type. I mean, there will be just the base identity for the type of network element, for the type of component, and then you can have the hardware inventory where you define the hardware components and eventually hardware-specific augmentations, and there will be the software inventory where you define the software components. Yeah, so you have something which is not implementable as alone.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if people want to do so fine grain, I personally don't have so much opposition. I just that the discussion I had was that the hardware is always present.
Okay, so let's move to Robert. Robert, please.
So just speaking as a contributor, I'll try and keep my comments fairly quick because I'm conscious of time moving forward. I think for me, one thing that I'm hearing in these discussions is there's some confusion about terminology in terms of what does physical versus hardware mean? Does that include virtual devices and things? And also what is meant by software again? Does that include virtual devices? I think it'd be useful if we build a list of terminology and make sure we're all talking about the same thing on the same item. So that'd be helpful in terms of discussion. The other aspect of this I think is interesting is if you look at the open config model, which I appreciate is a device level model, not a network level model, they have a lot of flexibility as to how components are put together and how you sort of have components as subcomponents, both at the hardware level. You can do it down to list the RPs and the line cards under a network device, but the same at the software level. You can also list those software packages and sub packages and things as well. So in that model, certainly they allow some flexibility to allow these components to be children of each other. I can't imagine why you'd have hardware under software in that case, in terms of like software packages and things. So I think that's worth thinking. And also the other thing, more generally, I think is worth thinking about is how much flexibility do we have with these models in terms of how these things are structured versus how fixed they are in this structure, which may sort of limit how they're used. Finally, in terms of how we sort of structure these models. I personally like to see a very simple base model in a draft because I think that's easy to define. That maybe covers some terminology and things like that. And then I would like to see the other models being defined in separate drafts and either augmenting or potentially sitting as separate top-level trees as appropriate.
Shufan?
Working group contributor. So I think I can understand the requirements that for the hardware owning use cases from the operator's perspective. But I'm thinking is that have you ever considered the filter mechanism like the XPath or subtree filter that used to get the hardware only data instead of modeling the software and hardware separately? You can still model them together, but use some filter mechanism to filter out the hardware only data. I think that's might be okay for the hardware only cases.
I would say that technically it works, but I would say that we are more ready. We are at a more advanced stage if we tackle just the hardware part first, and then we do the augmentation later. From a technical point of view, I agree with you, Shufang. I don't see any big difference. But I mean, given that from an hardware point of view, we already have a lot of good material, and we are in let me say in a good position. Probably just from a practical point of view, keeping the two things separate would allow us having the network inventory part ready quicker. This is just my thought. Tony? Tony, please, it's your turn. I guess you're speaking because I see you are not muted, but we can't hear you.
Hello?
Now it works.
Sorry, Meet Echo takes a long time to get turned on. Let me turn on the mic. I don't understand why. So Tony Lee, Juniper Networks, I'd like to bring up a new topic. I'm interested in doing power management of hardware, and it seems like this is something that could be easily augmented into the models that you're building. How should I go about doing this?
I think you can easily create a new module that augments the base.
I agree.
Whether your augmentation applies to both hardware and software, blah, 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 but yes, that depends on.
This is also in line with the discussion that Alex and I had a while back on the mailing list. Basically, for the green networking part, there is a portion of it which is basically what you can read on the data sheets, which can easily be added as an augmentation to the network inventory, the top module here. Would you agree?
Okay. There's a lot of stuff that we want to do that's actually dynamic. Being able to read active power utilization would be helpful. And then also being able to power things on and off would be helpful.
Well, things like actual power consumption, I'm not sure that's inventory. Inventory, again, the very first thing that we need to do is some terminology and scoping on what is inventory, what is not. We came to some sort of agreement on the mailing list, if I'm not mistaken, that inventory is what you can read on a data sheet. But I mean, that was just at the very early stages of our discussion. That can be changed, but just to give some scope to the discussion. So we have 15 minutes left, and we have one presentation to go. So ideally, we, if it works for you, I would go with these two comments. 5 minutes, if you can squeeze your presentation to 5 minutes, Marisola, that would be great, and then 5 minutes for wrap up. So Marisola, please.
Perfect. I don't see the slides yet.
Okay, yeah. So you in the queue, I thought you had the comment.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to reply to Tony. We have been augmenting our DMLMO to report on power measurements dynamically, as he said. It might be good to have a call with him, because I think it's really interesting for us as well.
That makes sense, but then it goes outside the scope of licenses.
Yes,
so
yes,
probably
yes.
the MLMO needs to be
Yes.
broken into licenses plus something else, and this falls into something else. Okay, fine. So I see no one else in the queue. I'll stop the sharing and pull up your slides.
Okay. I will. Thank you. Thank you, Daniele, and the working group. I would like to be quick. Our intention in the name of the authors was to reiterate our proposal to bring it to IVY working group, right? And bring ALMO as the new draft we presented from previous IETF, and as well our intention to move DMLMO, which it was compromising the framework plus the data models to make it only with the data models to be the MALMO as we propose. And we will incorporate already the feedback that we got as well after that meeting, highlighting the feedback from Mo as well. If you go to the next slide. You might remember this slide from previous IETF meetings, and many of the points that has been highlighted already here on the session, we have been somehow addressing. That's why we believe it will be good to keep as a reference the draft as well from the best practices. And if you see on the diagram on the life cycle management, we have been looking at different states of what we could consider part of the discussion that has been here on the inventory. The location, just the placement of that hardware or software, it is one of the use cases we are looking for on the ALMO promise statement proposal. Entitlement, we don't call it hardware or software, as we call it is an asset. And we highlighted that an asset, it is any hardware or software, even a component, right? And even the association of those components that might bring another asset. And we even extend to the concept of a service when there is a kind of a solution built from that network offering, right? But our purpose on ALMO is basically the use, since we know what we have to get into our network, and the next step is how we are going to use it. We have to associate the license or an entitlement. We have to enable certain features. We are using those capabilities as part of this life cycle that is bringing as well that dynamic concept that Tony mentioned. that could be a use case on the power management measurements as well. But this is part of the concept from ALMO. We are not looking at the inventory itself as we can consume and we prove. And I want to make another call out to the appendix being part of the draft, where we give a practical example, and thank you to Jan Lindblad for the exercise that we did on the augmentation. We can augment adding modules that will add attributes on top of what we could consider a hardware-based module or a software-based module, or as we were proposing initially, an asset-based module. We can augment adding, licenses as is this proposed in the DMLMO draft. If you go to next slide, Daniele. And I just want to highlight what is important to consider as part of the work of IVY working group. I mentioned about asset, right? We try to combine the concept of hardware, software, even for hardware or software being virtual or physical, and even a service. There is an easy extension of the attributes that we want to extend from the basic module, and the augmentation or the consumption of those modules that will be part of a basic inventory. It is possible within the DMLMO, and some practice that could be taken for new proposals. I believe that might be part of the outcome of the IVY working group, with reducing the work that we also have done. And I mentioned before, we don't refer, based on the feedback we got in the OPSA working group, we don't refer anymore to license, but to entitlement, right? And we redefined in our model as well. But we believe we have a good base model, being an independent module into the DMLMO for entitlement reference. You can go to next slide. This is our proposal for our next IETF, right? In the meeting to work on in the coming weeks. But we will release a new version of ALMO based on the IVY working group, and a new version for the data model for ALMO based on the DMLMO that already is there submitted. But this will be as part of our proposal for the next IETF session. We would like to count with the collaboration from the teams as well. This is kind of how we started a couple of years ago with the MLMO, and the main characteristics that we have been working on since then. And hopefully you have the summary of what we are also trying to achieve for next IETF, to present a more solid proposal with a better description on the use cases as well on the ALMO, and present the new version for the data models on ALMO for IVY working group. We will try to collaborate still to the other working groups, but making sure that we have something work through this team as part of the use cases that could be derived of the inventory work. With that, I have completed the presentation. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me share one slide that you have already seen, and just to share some thoughts with you. This is not any decision is being taken now, but If if we assume to have the split into these 4 modules, which by the way would be 5, because the 5th would be the mapping of the inventory against the topology. But I mean, I think everyone agrees that that is something that can come at a later stage. If we use a split like this one, probably we can adopt all the 3 drafts and have a simple mapping against these modules. The SICAM draft could be used as the network inventory, starting from the hardware use cases, including what is hardware from the OPSA draft. The software part of the OPSA draft remaining in the draft could be adopted as the software network inventory. The licenses, for the licenses part, we could adopt the ALMO draft. I don't know if, I mean, as Marisol said, there is more than licenses in ALMO. I don't know if that could be split, or we change licenses into something that is something more. If I correctly understood, the entitlement is licenses plus something more. For example, the power consumption thing would fall into entitlements. If yes, we just call this module here IETF entitlements network inventory, and we are done. And probably a new document, the fourth document would be a brand new one to cover the network element location, and the 5th for the mapping against the topology. If no one has big concerns against this split, I think that the way is pretty straightforward, and we can adopt all the documents and reshuffle the content according to this drawing. Probably the only thing that remains to be discussed is the issue that Bo and Italo were discussing before on the top level module. We still have 3 minutes. And any reaction to this proposal? Shufang and Rob to start with.
I think then, we did not have a very fully discussion today because of the limiting of time. So do you think it makes sense for us to tag it to the mailing list to continue our discussion? And I think any agreement should be reached over the mailing list. And
of course. I just wanted to collect real-time feedbacks to this. Again, not any proposal. Is a loud thinking being shared with the working group? Rob?
Sure.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. I think it'd be a good idea for you to write that proposal down on the list, so it's sort of clear what's being proposed here to get reaction. I did wonder though whether doing a non-indicative show of hands to see what if people think this is the right direction now might be interesting, but I have it as like a non-binding vote. Maybe.
Yes. In the meanwhile, do we have anyone else that wants to share? So show events tool title. Agree with Daniele's mapping proposal. We have 3, 4, 5. I promise that sooner or later I will have a bad idea. Not this time. Okay. So we have 14 to 4. 5. Okay. Okay. Any one of the 6 that were against it would like to say something now? In any case, we are continuing the discussion on the mailing list. We will articulate, we will put down the proposal, and then we can have a better discussion there. But if someone wants to say why not now, probably it could help. Please, Alex.
I put no. I didn't know exactly. I think I agree with the overall philosophy, what you're doing here. I don't. I'm not sure I'm on board with some of the details, like what I mentioned. Right, the element location, I still think should be separate. It should not be augmenting network inventory. Again, there are details, but I think that is basically the thing where I said, basically, just as it is depicted here right now. I said basically we need to have a little further discussion.
Okay. Bob?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I mean, still this mapping doesn't clear to me because I don't know what the network inventory is and like what the network element is, because I cannot understand what this mapping means. So that's the reason why I still need more like clearly precise term definition to make a decision. Yeah, please.
Okay. So we are past the end of the meeting. I think that the next step, Xufang and I will meet. We'll write down a proposal on how to proceed, and we will continue from there. Thanks a lot, everyone, for participation and the good comments. And let's continue the discussion on the mailing list. Thank you.
See you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.